So here we are. We're talking about returning to worship at St. David's and understanding the process and your responsibilities if you do decide to come back to worship in the church. That is a different experience for most of us, thinking about church as something that we have responsibilities for. It's not really new, but it is a different way for us to think about what it means to come to church on a given Sunday. Well, if I can figure out, there we go. So the bishop shared this passage from Philippians in one of our recent calls with the clergy that I thought really spoke to this time that we're in right now. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others. That is a helpful sort of framework for thinking about what it means to worship together in this new environment and with the new rules and regulations that are going to be put on us. But it's important to remember that the first goal is not rules, but it's everyone's safety. And a lot of the regulations that we have are not about our own safety, it's about the safety of others. So the idea is that if we can all work hard at keeping others safe and they're working hard at keeping us safe, then everyone will come through this in the healthiest way possible. The other main goal that we have is living as faithful Christians. Certainly coming to church is part of the way that we live as faithful Christians, if it's at all possible, but also caring for others is a big part of what it means to live as faithful Christians. In our baptismal covenant, we ask, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons and loving your neighbor as yourself? I think that's a helpful framework for thinking about the things that are difficult for us during this time. If it feels like a pain to put on a mask, think about the ways that that is an opportunity for you to show your love of neighbor for others. So, deciding for yourself. Deciding whether or not to participate in worship is a matter of personal discernment. We won't all come to the same conclusion, and that's okay. A lot of the things that you might think about as you're deciding whether or not to come is you might consider your age. The CDC and all the scientists who know a lot more than I do keep saying that if you're over 65, you are at greater risk. That doesn't mean you can't come if you're over 65, but it just may be something that you consider as you're deciding whether or not to come. You might consider what other underlying health conditions you have, either you or others in your household. I know the bishop has talked about her own experience as a person who has asthma. And as a result, she's being very, very cautious about what she's willing to do in terms of going out to churches. She has already made the decision that all of her Episcopal visitations, I believe through the end of the next program year, through about a year from now, are all going to be virtual. She's not going to be going directly to congregations in person unless something major changes because she has an underlying health condition. You also might consider other risk factors that you face or others in your household face. If you know that there are people around you that have risk factors, you may decide to stay away just so that you can keep them safe. It's part of how we show our love for our neighbor. An important thing to consider is whether or not you're willing to comply with the safety protocols. If we go through all this and you hear about, you're going to hear a lot about wearing a mask. If you feel like it's going to be uncomfortable or difficult for you to wear a mask, you probably shouldn't come to church. But whatever you decide, you are still a part of the St. David's family, and we promise not to forget anyone. And the other side of it is whatever decision you come to, we will continue online worship indefinitely. We actually have just gotten some new technology set up. We've been working on that over the past about a week now. And as of today, we've done a test run and it is fully set up and ready. So our online streaming will be a little different than it has been, which it was going to have to be different anyway, just because of different arrangement for the church. But the online streaming is going to continue no matter what. And of course, it is also true that you can change your mind at any time. If you come to church and you find that you can't concentrate on worship because you don't feel safe, it's okay to change your mind and decide you want to worship from home after that. If you want to spend the next few weeks watching to see what it's like at church, it's okay to change your mind after that and come to church later. We support you no matter what you do. But the church has been doing things for a long time now to make sure that we're ready for you. One of the things that you'll find is that there is hand sanitizer throughout the building. I actually started working on acquiring this hand sanitizer back in March. This is something that I knew was going to be needed, and so started ordering, and it took about a month for it to actually come in. But in the church, there are hand sanitizer stations at the two back rows, backside entrances. Thinking long-term, basically, if you're coming in from the parish hall or if you're coming in from the parking lot, you have access to a wall-mounted hand sanitizer unit. And up at the choir pews, there's also a pump for hand sanitizer just before you receive communion. And that's what they look like. In addition, we have had enhanced cleaning and disinfecting protocols happening since the lockdown began. Even though the church building was used a whole lot less during lockdown, it was still used regularly by me and by Christina from time to time. Mary Esther was coming in. We had a steady stream of a few people who were coming in regularly. So Guy got instructed early on about how to go about disinfecting door handles and light switches and frequently touched surfaces. And that's been happening from the very beginning. So that is nothing new at this point. Additionally, there are a lot of new responsibilities for greeters. Basically, the greeters are sort of our first line of defense in terms of enacting safety protocols and making sure people are complying with safety protocols, that sort of thing. So I actually have sent out a large document so far just to John Simonelli, who's going to be our greeter this Sunday, but it will be going to all of our greeters as we move forward so that they're aware of the new responsibilities. Unnecessary, hard to clean items have been removed from the church. A lot has been removed from the church. You'll find when you do show up, either this Sunday or on some following Sunday, that it looks very, very different from the way you remember it before lockdown began. In fact, I said to Michael as we were sort of getting everything together, it actually feels like after the stripping of the altar on Maundy Thursday. It's very stark right now. But like, here's a couple of examples. On the picture on the right, all of the prayer books and hymnals have been removed from the pews. Those are, first of all, we don't need them in church right now because we've been printing bulletins for a long time that are all inclusive. But also, even if we were using them, we would need to take them out now because they're too hard to keep clean from week to week and from person to person. You notice on the altar, this picture shows that there's a plain white covering on the altar. On Sunday, there will be nothing on the altar. No fabric of any kind. Certainly not the big hanging paraments that hang on it. Because again, they're just too hard to disinfect and too hard to keep clean. One of the regulations from the diocese is that we have to keep all fabric out of the church, except those things that can be washed between services. So as a result, I'll be wearing only an alb and a stole, and I actually purchased a stole that is machine washable so that it can be washed between services. The flags have been removed from the church. The two banners that are on either side of the altar have been removed from the church, just so that we can make sure that they aren't collecting things and making it hard to disinfect going forward. The worship booklets that we use on Sundays are preset and printed in advance. They're not going to be handed to you as you walk into the door, but they're going to be at your seat waiting for you. There'll be one at each seating position. So if you have if you're sitting alone, then you have one, but if you're sitting with someone else from your household, then you'll still just have one. We're having to print those 4 days in advance, again, by the regulations of the diocese. So at 4 days in advance, we don't know who's coming. So rather than wasting a lot of paper on bulletins, we figured folks from the same household could share. Another thing that we've planned for is that there will be fewer people on the altar and also behind the scenes making worship happen. One of the things is that Michael is going to be the only acolyte for the time being. Because we are from the same household, it's a way of us limiting exposure for ourselves, but also limiting exposure for everyone else, not having people come in who aren't used to the process week after week Additionally, Michael's going to be the only altar guild member for the time being. And again, that's just because the processes that are being required by the diocese are so much more exhaustive, or so much more detailed and tedious than they were before, just to make sure that the altar guild isn't putting anyone in danger. Rather than going to the effort of training all the members of the altar guild and then not having them not do it every week, and maybe some of them will remember and some of them won't. It's just easier if Michael just does it all for right now, and he's agreed to do that. So another thing you'll find is that a lot of liturgical items have been moved to help ensure safe physical distances. We are using the pulpit and the lectern now. You may remember the lectern used to be right up in front of the piano, right at the first pew. Obviously, that isn't far enough away. People who are doing public speaking and leading worship are required to be a minimum of 12 feet away from any parishioners. And this setup has the lectern and the pulpit 15 feet away from the nearest parishioner. So we are exceeding the guidelines of the diocese in that regard. The piano has also been moved because, again, if the piano were there at that first pew, it would be very hard to maintain appropriate and safe physical distancing for Sal. So it's been moved over there into the corner, and then there's another seat where he can sit when he's not playing so that he maintains appropriate distance from the pulpit. The baptismal font was moved to the front. Basically, the main reason for that is if it's in the back, it's more likely to be touched, and the more things that get touched have to get disinfected. So moving that out of the way made it so that we could not have to worry about disinfecting that. Actually, the previous slide, you'll see the Paschal candle also has been moved to the front for that same reason. So here's the biggest change that is sort of hard for me to wrap my mind around as a priest who takes welcome as seriously as I do. But in order to come to church, you really do have to plan ahead, and you have to have a ticket or reservation. It won't be allowed for you to just show up on Sunday. The reason for that is, A, so we don't have too many people show up and not be able and have to turn people away. The other reason is we need to be able to keep track of who came to church, and not just who came, but where they sat for contact tracing purposes. In case anyone should become sick, we need to be able to present that information to the health department. So the easiest and preferable way of getting a ticket is to go online, stdavidskinnelon.org/tickets. Select the date that you want to attend. It should be the top one on the sheet there, on the page. Tickets are available each Sunday beginning at noon, and ticketing will close at 10 a.m. on Saturday each week. But that's only for online ticketing. If you're not able to handle the online, or if it gives you any trouble for whatever reason, you can call in the church office and get a ticket, but we do have to have an earlier deadline for that. Christina, our parish administrator, is working remotely. So she's in the office from time to time, but not consistently. So you need to call by noon on Monday. That way we know that she'll have a chance to hear the message in time for us to make our plans. So if you are planning to come, each ticket is good for one seating position. This gets a little confusing. One of the first questions people ask me is, how many people can we have in a Sunday service? A lot of that depends on who comes. So each seating position is good for up to 2 people, but they have to be from the same household. So for example, if Marty and I were to come together, we couldn't sit together because we're not from the same household. But if Michael and I were getting a seating position together, we could sit together because we're from the same household. If John Simonelli comes, because he lives alone and doesn't have anyone else in his household, he takes up one seating position, even though it can accommodate up to 2 people. There are 2 seating positions in the church that will accommodate only 1 person just because of the structural beams that are there, seating position 1 and seating position 3. But every other seating position will accommodate up to 2 people. The green arrows on this chart show that we'll be seated on opposite aisles, the center aisle and the side aisles. And each of those green arrows represent a minimum of 6 feet of distance. Sometimes it's a little bit more, but it's at least 6 feet of distance between any of the two seating positions. So if you do want to get a ticket and tickets aren't available, eventbrite.com will make it possible for you to join a waiting list. And if someone cancels, then you will get an email automatically if your position on the waiting list moves up and you're able to get one. So with that in mind, if you do get a ticket and need to cancel, please let us know as soon as possible so that we can make sure that someone who's waiting might be able to get a ticket. Another point about seating is that it will be assigned. You notice each of the seating positions on this chart are numbered 1 through 18, but there are actually 20 spots there. The greeter down at the bottom on the right is a seating position, but that is not a ticketed position. If you're the greeter, then that's your seat. The same with the lector at the top right. If you are the lector for the day, you don't have to get a ticket, that's your seat. But everyone else will have to get a ticket. Even if you're on the disinfecting team, you do still need to get a ticket. And basically the order in which tickets come in or requests come in, that's how they'll be seated, is just down the line. If we find that we're not using all of the seats available, I probably will move us so that we're not all just like seated on the left side of the church or just on the right side of the church. We'll just I'll move folks up so that we are as close as we can be while still maintaining distance. These are what the seating positions look like right now. Michael and I tried to make this as foolproof as possible. If there's an X there, you shouldn't sit there. If there is a line across the seat, that is an indication that you shouldn't be sitting there. There's a pink X also on places where you shouldn't be seated, and a little yellow stripe on places where seating positions are happening. And you'll notice that on the seat, like seat 9 there in the picture on the right, there is not a blue line across the seat. So that says that that is a good place to sit. Additionally, all of the seating positions are numbered, like you see there. The seats on the side aisles, the numbers are on the wall, so it's easier to see from far away. On the center aisle, the seating positions are numbered. The signs are on the pews themselves. So some things to think about on Sunday. If you're sick, please stay home. I actually got an email about this from someone earlier today. In the letter, it said, even if you have a case of the sniffles, please stay home. The question was, what if you have, like, a lot of us have allergies, and maybe we have the sniffles all the time. Does that mean we can never come to church? No, I think you have to really just know your body. Like, if something is, if you have allergies and this is a regular part of your experience, then you know that, and you know that this is nothing new. But you can also tell if it's something different. So if it feels even a little different, even if you don't think it's COVID, just if it feels different, just stay home for the day. Watch online. We'd rather have an abundance of caution. But like I said, you have to know your body and make your decision based on how you normally feel. If you happen to have come into close contact with someone who was diagnosed with COVID-19, it's important that you stay home. You should really be quarantining for 2 weeks. And you might even consider getting tested if you've had close contact, just so that you can be sure that you are safe and not sharing the disease with anyone else. Because of the seating positions, it will be necessary for you to arrive early. The first thing you'll do is check with the greeter. I think I have that later in a slide, and the greeter will tell you where your seating position is. But it's going to take a little bit more time for folks to get connected, or to figure out where they're supposed to go. So please do plan to arrive at least a few minutes early so that you're not coming in and interrupting the service for someone else who did arrive. Bring a mask. It is critical that everyone have a mask. We do have masks available, disposable masks, in case anyone just completely forgets. Like, I've done it. I've left the house and I've forgotten my mask. I'm like, oh no, now I don't have a mask. It happens, but do plan on having a mask because our supply of those is not unlimited, and they can be hard to come by. Again, I planned way in advance to get these for us, so now we have them, but if we run out, it'll be harder to get. Also, you might consider bringing a light sweater. One of the requirements of the diocese is that it will be necessary for us to have the air conditioners on all the time. In the assuming these protocols are still in place when we get to warmer months, the heater will be on all the time, and also the ceiling fans will be on. We have to keep the air flowing as a safety protocol. If you're uncomfortable or if you're cold, we're not going to be able to turn off the air for you. So plan ahead and bring a light sweater if you think you might get cold. Everyone should park in the main lot and enter through the side door. Most of us do this anyway, but there are always a few people who like to park right outside the offices here and come in through the other way. We would prefer for you not to do that because our disinfecting team won't be disinfecting these doors. The assumption is that nobody will be coming in this way. So please do park in the main lot and come in through the side door so that everything is as safe as possible for you. Please do not bring in outreach donations at this time. We are not able to hold them or distribute them. If you would like to support our outreach projects, and we certainly hope you will, please do consider contributing to our voucher program. You can do that online at stdavidskenneland.org/donate. Or you can mail in a check to the church office and note food pantry on the check. Those monies are distributed to our 5 area food pantries and also to North Porch. As soon as we have $1,200, we send out 6 checks for $200 apiece. So if you would like to support outreach, that is the easiest way to do that at St. David's. Also, if you still want to continue contributing food to our community food pantry, you can deliver your food directly to the Butler Community Church, the Church of the Nazarene in Butler. But do not plan to bring it to St. David's because we won't be delivering it for you. So I said one of the big things you will hear is that you need to wear a mask. It is very, very, very important that everyone wear a mask all the time. One of the questions that came up in our call with the bishop is what do we do if someone refuses to wear a mask? Or what do we do if they start wearing a mask incorrectly at some point during the service? Her response was, I think, a little surprising to a lot of us, but also was very matter of fact. She said, first of all, if someone shows up without a mask, offer them one. If someone refuses to wear a mask at any point during the service, ask them to leave. If they don't leave, call the police and have them removed from the premises. That's the process. The other part of that process is if there's not a mask, if anyone is not wearing a mask, I'm leaving the room. The service will end. It will not continue that day because we're going to have to disinfect the space again. If we feel like we've been exposed to COVID, we might end up having to shut down services for a while if someone doesn't wear a mask. So please wear a mask, wear it the entire time, and wear it correctly. You might ask yourself, well, what is the correct way of wearing a mask? I would suggest it should cover both your nose and your mouth at all times. I don't know about you, but I have been out and about a little bit. Michael and I are still staying pretty socially distant and still quarantining mostly, but we have been out to stores a couple of times from time to time, and I often see this, and it drives me crazy. The mask should not be below your nose. If the mask is below your nose, you're not providing full protection either to yourself or to anyone else. Another thing that I see sometimes, which just absolutely boggles my mind, is sometimes people wear a mask, but they wear it around their chin. Well, I suppose that's helping to keep your chin safe and healthy, but that's not how the disease is transmitted. So please don't wear the mask around your. When you do arrive, first thing you'll see is the lectern has been moved right there facing the door as you come in from the parking lot. So speak with the greeter and he or she will tell you where to sit. There'll be a seating number and then the numbers are over each aisle. You can see where the set of numbers are and it should be clearly marked in the church, so you should be able to find it pretty easily. We've been asked to ask parishioners to try to avoid using the restroom if at all possible. It's difficult to have any kind of system in place to disinfect the restroom between users. So if you have to use the restroom, obviously you can, but we do require that only one person can be in each restroom at a time, and you have to continue to maintain 6 feet of distance from everyone. I mentioned the hand sanitizers that are mounted around the building. There's also one mounted just outside the restrooms, and also just one just inside the office doors. So that's available for you if you do have to use the restroom. There are a lot of liturgy changes that you'll find. The service will feel very different from what it has, even during the time of quarantine. To my surprise, Holy Communion is being allowed. I sort of assumed when we first came back that we would only be allowed to do morning prayer, but the bishop has allowed Holy Communion, but with a lot of restrictions in place that we'll get to in just a few minutes. We won't be singing the Gloria at the beginning of the service that we normally sing. I found a shorter version of the Song of Praise rather than the full Gloria that we would normally say or sing. In fact, there won't be singing at all. There will only be instrumental music, and even within that, we have been told that we can't have any wind instruments because, again, it projects particles farther than we're comfortable having happen. The peace will be physically distant. You remember before we went into lockdown, we had that one Sunday where we were doing physically distant peace and elbow bumps and things like that. We won't do even that. Everyone will be required to stay in their seating position at the peace. You can be standing, obviously, and you're encouraged to look around and say hi to everyone, bow to people, give the peace sign, do whatever you got to do. But do not leave your seating position, please, and please do not touch anyone outside of your household. The joys and concerns also will be happening from the front. I mentioned this earlier. One of the regulations from the diocese is that anyone doing public speaking and worship has to be a minimum of 15 feet, or excuse me, a minimum of 12 feet away from the nearest parishioner. The reason for that is because aerosolized particles in our breath travel farther when we're speaking or singing loudly. So they say it travels farther during diaphragmatic breathing. And actually public speaking is similar to singing in that regard. Because of that, you won't be able to share your joys and concerns from your seat. I'd still encourage you to email me in advance, and I'm happy to share them. For those who are worshiping from online, they can still do it in the comments. Michael will be following on his phone, so we can share them live with those who are on Facebook, but not with those who are in the room. Though I suppose you could be on your phone on Facebook and comment that way, but we'll see how that goes. The offering station is at the front of the church. The plate will not be passed between people during the service. Again, we don't want to be touching things at the same time as much as we can help it. So if you would like to present your offering in church, then by all means, please bring it with you. Bring it up when you're coming to communion and drop it in the plate before you receive. But of course, you don't have to. Consider giving online, again, stdavidskinnelon.org/donate. Consider mailing in your offering. All of those are perfectly safe and desirable options if that's what you prefer. So there is a new process for receiving communion. This is not one that actually affects us a lot, but the diocese has said that like baked bread cannot be used at communion. It has to be wafers. Well, we've been using wafers anyway. But only bread will be served to the congregation. The chalice will not be passed between people. A very, very small amount of wine will be consecrated as a part of the Eucharist, and I will consume it all at the altar. The greeter will direct each household to come forward. It won't be a long line standing there waiting. There will only be 2 households at a time up at the front. You'll see on this picture here, there are 2 blue lines in the carpet. Stand on the first blue line while you're waiting to receive communion. And then when it's your turn to receive, walk up to the second blue line, and there you can receive communion. So when it is time to receive, just cross your hands and extend them in front of you. The wafer will be dropped into your hand. We will not touch in any way. If by chance I happen to touch anyone in the process of administering communion, the process will stop and I will go back to the back of the church. I'll be wearing gloves while distributing communion. I will hand sanitize and change gloves, both. It's overkill, it's more than is necessary, but that's our sort of guiding principle here, is doing more than is necessary throughout. Do not eat your wafer as soon as you receive it. First, return to your seat to eat your wafer. And do not remove your mask. Perhaps you're asking yourself, how do I eat my communion wafer without removing my mask? Here's a handy little video to show you how to go about doing that. Just lift up the bottom of your mask and you can slip the wafer in under and eat it that way. Then replace your mask. When the service is ended, it will be a different process than it has been in the past. You should remain in your seat until the greeter dismisses you. Wait patiently, just like the sweet puppy here. Do not make a mad dash for the exit like you see on airplanes. And then please take everything from your pew with you. Please take the service booklet, the bulletin that you've been using. If you have brought in anything like scratch paper or notes or tissues or anything like that, please take them with you. We don't want to endanger anyone by having to clean up anything that you've left behind. There are, we have some new trash cans that are going to be at the exit of the church. One is going to be dedicated for recycling for your service booklet, and then the other is just a regular trash can for whatever you want to send to the landfill. For the time being, there is no coffee hour. We have been doing online virtual coffee hour. Obviously, that's not going to continue now because a significant portion of our congregation will be in the room. But so for now, there's no social gatherings of any kind after church. Please, please, please do not linger in the back of the church. Just as soon as you're dismissed, leave the building. And then when you do get into the parking lot, please don't linger there, because we still want to keep everyone safe even when they're outside the building. Normally we have vestry on duty for each Sunday, and that's an important way for us to communicate with the congregation. For this time, we won't be having vestry on duty. If you do need to communicate with someone from leadership, you can always email or call any member of the vestry or me anytime, and we will do our best to hear you and answer your needs. In-person worship will continue as long as it's safe to do so, but it could be suspended again. I've often said to people, this is not a one-way street. There's a distinct possibility that at some point in the future, we're going to have to cancel in-person worship and go back to online only again. Just be prepared for that so that if it happens, it won't come as a huge surprise. Few of the ways that it could, or the reasons that it could be suspended going forward, if the governor's order requires it. The governor's order has been a fluid thing, and like last week we thought that in-person dining or indoor dining in restaurants was going to happen, but after seeing the evidence from other states where that hasn't worked out well, this week the governor decided no, we won't have indoor dining in restaurants. So the situation is fluid and it could change at any time. If another stay-at-home order is reinstated or instated, I suppose, then we will have to suspend in-person worship. At any time, the bishop's guidance for us could change. This plan has been approved by the diocese. Marty and Kathy and I have been working on it and came up with a very detailed plan that we submitted to the diocese, and they approved our return to in-person worship. But that could change at any time, and the restrictions around what's necessary could change at any time. If anyone who's attended services at St. David's is diagnosed with COVID-19, we will be suspending in-person worship at least for a period of 2 weeks, if not longer. So just be aware, if that happens, that's going to be our first response. We'll also be monitoring infection, hospitalization, and death rates around us and in our area. If those rates spike again, then we will discontinue in-person worship. And for now, Thursday services are going to remain online only, again, because of the disinfecting requirements and the protocols that are in place. For now, we're going to just have Sunday as our only in-person opportunity. but we'll continue streaming on Thursdays. Some members of the church will choose to participate online and not in person, and that is okay. We shouldn't try to pressure anyone to come or to not come, so long as they're abiding by all the safety protocols. But it's just important to remember, I say again, it's a matter of personal discernment. And no matter what happens, it still will continue to be important for us to reach out to one another. When this first started, one of the things I asked of every member of the congregation was to reach out to another member of the congregation once a day. Things have changed since then. We're not quite as isolated as we were. So what I've said is just continue to reach out to people regularly. Maybe once a week is what's comfortable for you, maybe twice a week, something like that. But I encourage you to reach out to people that you haven't seen in a while, or people that you know, or people that you know live alone and maybe feeling lonely. Reach out to people that just, if somebody pops into your mind, reach out and let them know that they've popped into your mind. We are still a church community, and the community is key, even though we can't live into that community the way that we've done it in the past. So going forward, final notes, please don't forget to get your tickets. Tickets are available online up until 10 o'clock on Saturday. If you are unable to do online ticketing for this week only, I would please email me and I'll figure it out. I don't want anyone to not come to church because they tried to get a ticket and couldn't figure it out. We can't do that always going forward, but since this is the first week, let's email me and I'll make it happen. Don't call the church office because tomorrow is my day off and Christina is on vacation for the weekend. So we won't be hearing your message if you call the church office. If you need a ticket and can't figure it out, please email me at this point. And going forward, just remember the main goals. Our main goals are to keep everyone safe and to live our lives as faithful Christians. It feels sort of heavy with the rules and the burdens of all the protocols that we have to follow. But all of those rules and protocols are grounded in those two main goals, keeping everyone safe and trying to encourage all of us to live our lives as faithful Christians.